All right, we are going to start in 1 Samuel chapter 27. First Samuel 27. So we talked about Jonathan last week. We're wrapping up, heading into David's ascension to being king. So we're just going to wrap up and make that transition this week, and hopefully get into that king part next week. So we're going to start in 1 Samuel chapter 27, verses 1 through 7. And David said in his heart, I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than that I should speedily escape into the land of the Philistines. And Saul shall despair of me to seek me any more in any coast of Israel. So shall I escape out of his hand. And David arose, and he passed over with the 600 men that were with him unto Achish, the son of Maoch, king of Gath. And David dwelt with Achish at Gath, he and his men, every man with his household, even David with his two wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail the Carmelitess, Nabal's wife. And it was told Saul that David was fled to Gath, and he sought no more again for him. And David said unto Achish, If I have now found grace in thine eyes, let them give me a place in some town in the country, that I may dwell there. For why should thy servant dwell in the royal city with thee? Then Achish gave him Ziklag that day, wherefore Ziklag pertaineth unto the kings of Judah unto this day. And the time that David dwelt in the country of the Philistines was a full year and 4 months. All right, so now, as we pick up here, there's a bunch of interesting little details that if we're just reading the story, we kind of blow over. All right, so hopefully we're going to bring those out. So why did David, in verse 1, why did David go to the land of the Philistines? We'll start off with the easy questions. Why did he go to the land of the Philistines? Because he was running from Saul. Okay, so then he had been being chased around Israel, right? So now why did he go to the land of the Philistines? Because Saul wouldn't go there. So he knew it was safe, air quotes. But what reason is given here as to why he went? Well, he thought Saul would kill him. What else? So he wouldn't perish. Okay, so he wanted to escape. When you want to escape something, what type of things do you want to escape? What emotions are involved with escaping? Fear? What else? What else? Say it again. His life? What else? What kind of emotions go along with wanting to escape? Why do we go on vacation? Isn't vacation an escape from work? An escape from our daily lives? Right? Why do you go? Peace. So he's looking for peace. Rest. Why do you want rest, Shirley? Right? Why do you need rest? Usually you need rest because you are tired. Okay, so now, as we've seen throughout, as we've studied since Genesis 1, right? These emotions that are involved, are they real or are they imaginary? Right? Fear is real. Being tired is real. Needing rest is real. The Lord himself departed from everybody, from the multitudes for a while for a period of rest, right? So these things are real. But what do these feelings, especially of fear and of being tired, what do they affect? Starts with a D. Rhymes with decisions. Decisions, right? Fear affects our decisions. When we're tired, are our decisions affected? Right? Not necessarily for the good. Okay? So we got to think about these things, right? And this will come into play again as we move in through 1 Samuel, getting into where David returns to Ziklag finds it burned, et cetera, and we'll cover that then. So these types of things will affect our decisions. What do we know about fear? 2 Timothy 1:7. What do we know about fear? It's not of God, right? God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Oh, okay. So when we start making decisions based on fear, who is influencing our life? Oh, Satan is, right? And what do we know about Satan? What does he want to do for us? Does he want to help us? Does he want to encourage us? Does he want to help us to grow as Christians? No, I see smiles and smirks all over the place, right? No, he's like a roaring lion, right? Seeking about to whom he may devour, right? All right, so this decision-making process happened where? Verse 1, first words. In his heart, right? These things happened in his heart. What do you know about your heart, Dennis? Right? It's deceitfully wicked. Right? Okay, so if you are now being influenced by fear, being physically and or mentally tired, right? Knowing that Satan's behind that, and your heart is helping you make these decisions, let's see, is that going to go well? No, right? So we got to be careful with that, all right? David said in his heart, I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. Now, what's interesting about that is this comes off of when Jonathan met him in the woods, right? And what did Jonathan tell him? Right, you're going to reign next and I'll be with you, right? So if you are dead, Peter, can you reign? No. Well, it's a little tough, right? What did God tell David he was going to be? King, right? So again, if you're dead, does God's plans get fulfilled? No. Who has kept you alive thus far? Right? The Lord has, right? Bear, lion, Goliath, etc., chasing Saul, being chased by Saul, right? All that. God's kept him alive. But now he's tired, right? He's making these decisions in his heart. So what happens in verse 2? What happens in verse 2? Say it again. Well, he didn't hide among the men, but he went with his, how many men? 600, right? So he's tired. His heart is, and his physical tiredness is affecting his decisions. So he makes up his mind, I'm going to the land of the Philistines. And how many people go with? 600 go with. All right, and we've talked about this before. Is leadership important? Right? Think about what just happened there. We now have 600 of what country are these men? Israelites. And they're now going to the land of Philistines. Those names don't match, do they? Right? Okay. What verse or what situation comes into your head where you see another situation like this where a leader gets tired, doesn't know what to do, and decides to go a-fishing? Right? Peter, right? It's a similar thing. Now, it's not just Peter that goes fishing, right? Hey, we go with you, right? So he takes others with him, okay? Was David's plan successful? Verse 4. Was David's plan successful? The yes or no question? Yes, it was. Very good. So his plan was successful. Okay? Does that mean it was right? No, it doesn't mean it was right. But one of the patterns I that we'll see as we've gone through since Genesis, and even more so in this story, is how God uses circumstances. Right? Do we know why David went to the Philistines? That's why he thought he went there. Do we know why he went there? Hopefully by the end of today, you will know why he went there. Okay? Because think about where he went. Where did he go? Right. The giants lived. Gath. Where was Goliath from? Right? So he's living in the same city as Goliath, who he killed, that everybody saw, and his brothers live. Why would you go there? Right? Think about the flip side of that. You're Achish. Right? How many men just came into your city? 600 men. 600 men just walk into your city and go, hey, king, I know we're from Israel, but can we stay here? Right. Who led by David, who killed the giant, right? Okay. So, and Achish goes, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do that. Okay. So, does that make sense? Does any of that make sense? Okay. But we'll see later who's actually at work here. Okay. So now in verse 6, he seeks to distance himself, right? Because he's like, okay, this living in Gath is not a good idea because I'm going to be watched here, right? So is there some place like on the outskirts, someplace quiet? We don't need to be in the royal city, being all humble about it. Can we just go over there, just like on the edge, so like Saul doesn't get us, but we're not really bothered by you either, right? And that's what's going on there in verse 6. So he gets Ziklag. Okay? And now in verse 7, how long is he there for? 1 year, 4 months. Time, right? Does God care about time? Does God care about time the same way we care about time? No. All right? Okay, very good. So now, as we progress, he's in Ziklag. He's actually looting Philistine cities, and instead of cities of Judah that Achish thought he was looting. But he wipes out the whole city so that nobody knows or nobody tells on him that, hey, David's not really our friend, but we're harboring him for some reason. Okay? So now, in chapter 28, we jump into, and it came to pass in those days that the Philistines gathered their armies together for warfare to fight with Israel. And Achish said unto David, know thou assuredly that thou shalt go out with me to battle, thou and thy men. All right, so now we've got this. We've got a year and a half, almost a year and a half that goes by. Okay? And now there's war again, Philistines with Israel. And Achish is like, guess what, pal? You're going with me. Because you've been fighting against Judah, or I think you've been fighting against Judah. So I know you hate them and they hate you, so this will be great for me. Right? But that's not what's been happening. All right? And now we come down to verse 5. And when Saul saw the host of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart greatly trembled. And when Saul inquired of the Lord answered him not, neither by dreams, nor by Urim, nor by prophets. All right, so here we see a familiar emotion again. What emotion is that? Right? So, again, Saul is being influenced by fear. Now, what does he try and do? He tries to go to the Lord. He tries to ask God and find out what he's supposed to do. Does God answer him? No. Why not? God has left him. Why has God left him? right? Because he rebelled and he was disobedient up until this point, and now God goes, now you're going to come to me? No, nice try, thanks for playing, right? Okay, so in verse 7, what does he do? Verse 7 reads, Then said Saul unto his servants, Seek me a woman that hath a familiar spirit, that I may go to her and inquire of her. And his servant said to him, Behold, there is a woman that hath a familiar spirit at Endor. So what does he think? What does he try and do then? Okay, God's not answering me. Now what? Yeah, go check with the witch, right? Seeks out a woman with a familiar spirit. Okay, and we've kind of talked about that in weeks past and in the situation that happens there. She brings up Samuel. And if we look at verses 17 through 19, And the Lord hath done to him as he spake by me, for the Lord hath rent the kingdom out of thine hand and given it to thy neighbor, even to David, because thou obeyest not the voice of the Lord, nor executest his fierce wrath upon Amalek. Therefore hath the Lord done this thing unto thee this day. Moreover, the Lord will also deliver Israel with thee into the hand of the Philistines. And tomorrow shalt thou and thy sons be with me. The Lord also shall deliver the host of Israel into the hand of the Philistines. Okay, so now, there's this battle coming up with the Philistines. He looks out and he sees, man, that's a lot of Philistines, right? Which is ironic just as Chuck walks in. Hi, Chuck. Right? He looks out and he's afraid. He tries to get answers from God but can't because he hasn't obeyed God up until this point. So he goes to the witch, and the witch brings up Samuel. Samuel tells him what's going to happen. Why has all this happened? What did 17 and 18 tell us? Because he was disobedient. Now, what's interesting there is it brings up a specific situation where Saul wasn't obedient. What is that situation? Okay, he didn't kill all the Amalekites he was supposed to. So remember, if you go back to 1 Samuel 15, that was the whole, you're supposed to wipe out Amalek and kill him and kill all the people. And what did he do? He didn't do that. But he pretended like he did. But God didn't like that. All right, so now, if you look at verse 18, there's interesting punctuation that is there. It says, because thou obeyest not the voice of the Lord, comma, nor executest his fierce wrath upon Amalek, comma, therefore hath the Lord done this thing. So there's two things that Saul has not done. Amalek is one of them. Amalek is one of them. What's the other one? He didn't obey the Lord. Now, we see a pattern of that in Saul's life, even leading up to this. But even in this account right here, in what he just did by going to the lady at Endor, is that obeying the Lord? No. Right? If we turn to Leviticus chapter 20. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. Leviticus 20. Leviticus 20, verse 6. Leviticus 20, verse 6 says, And the soul that turneth after such as have familiar spirits, which is what Saul just did, and after wizards, to go a-whoring after them, I will even set my face against that soul, and will cut him off from among his people. Okay, so now, if you know what Saul just did by going to the witch at Endor, and you read this verse and go, I will even set my face against that soul and will cut him off from among his people, what do you think is going to happen? Exactly that, right? Ooh, foreshadowing, right? Okay. What else, though, if we go back to 1 Samuel 28, if we look at 18 and 19, what else is going to happen? Israel gets turned over as well. Okay? So we remember that David up here went to the land of the Philistines and took 600 with him. Saul obeyed not the Lord, but how many people did he affect? All of Israel, a whole country gets affected. Which goes then back to our question of, is leadership important? Chuck?
You don't have to be a king to affect everybody else by your private sin. What happened?
Yep. Fathers and families do it all the time. Mothers and families do it all the time. Go all the way back. What's interesting then is, what then, you carry that over, the end of 19, and it says, and tomorrow shalt thou and thy sons be with me, Samuel speaking, and the Lord will deliver Israel, right? So, what did Saul just get told? You're going to die. Not only you, but your whole family. Why is that a big deal to Saul? No king. Think about what he was just doing, what he was trying to accomplish by chasing David all over the map, right? To assure that his kingdom would continue, to ensure that Jonathan would be the next king. So his whole decision-making process that had got him screwed up to this point, and then Samuel goes, guess what? Tomorrow it's all done. Everything that you've been fighting for, it didn't matter because you lost. Right? Because you didn't do what God told you to do. Right? What will fear make us do? What will fear make us do? Okay. Keep going then into 1 Samuel chapter 30. Chapter 29 is all about the Philistines gathering their armies together, taking attendance, and the leaders go, what's that David guy doing here? Right? So they kick him back. So this is, chapter 30 is after being denied by the Philistines the opportunity to fight against Israel. In verse 1 of chapter 30, and it came to pass when David and his men were come to Ziklag on the third day, that the Amalekites had invaded the south and Ziklag, and smitten Ziklag, and burned it with fire, and had taken the women captives that were therein. They slew not any, either great or small, but carried them away, and went on their way. So David and his men came to the city, and behold, it was burned with fire, and their wives and their sons and their daughters were taken captives. Then David and the people that were with him lifted up their voice and wept, until they had no more power to weep. And David's two wives were taken captives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail the wife of Nabal the Carmelite. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spake of stoning him, because the soul of all the people that was grieved, every man for his sons and for his daughters. But David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. And David said to Abiathar, the priest, and Ahimelech's man. And David said to Abiathar the priest, Ahimelech's son, I pray thee, bring me hither the ephod. And Abiathar brought thither the ephod to David. And David inquired at the Lord, saying, Shall I pursue after this troop? Shall I overtake them? And he answered him, Pursue, for thou shalt surely overtake them, and without fail recover it all. And then in verse 9, so David went. All right? So, what happens in verse 1? Peter. Uh-oh, okay. Back to Saul.
You cannot stop the results of your sin, as it were. But he did not lose his salvation.
True.
He's with Samuel.
Yep.
And so you can mess up your life and there can be bad results, but that doesn't tie in with your eternal salvation if you put your faith in God.
Correct. Very good. Yes. All right, and now back to David? Now back to David, okay. All right, so what happened in verse 1? All families are gone. Okay, is this a good thing? No, this is not a perceived good thing, is it? Right? But now let's remember how God uses circumstances. Okay? So keep that in the back of your head. He returns. He doesn't get to fight against Israel, which is probably a good thing. I'm not sure what he was thinking on how he was going to get out of that. But God took him out of that situation, kicked him back to Ziklag, finds Ziklag burned and everything gone. Okay? And now, what is the reaction of the people? What? They want to stone him. Because Ziklag being on fire was his fault. Right? Clearly, David had set it up ahead of time. You know, his little timer, you know, have your lights go off when you're gone. Something happened, it short-circuited, burned down Ziklag. So it's David's fault. Right? No, but he's the leader. Right? It's funny how quickly that pile who have been loyal to him turned because of circumstances. Okay? So, David handles this in stride then, and he's like, guys, it'll be fine. Right? Peter? Peter? Not yet, Peter. Right? Focus, Peter. Okay? Verse 6, what is David's attitude? He's distressed. Why? Why should David be distressed? All his stuff is gone too. Yeah, his life's in danger too. They're all 601 people, all have the same problem. But everybody wants to kill David now. Right? But what does David do? Right? He encourages himself in the Lord. Okay, so now, when Saul was distressed, what did Saul do? Went to the witch at Endor, usually tries to kill somebody with a javelin, right? None of these situations end up good. Lives by his own devices. David, on the other hand, he likes to go back and forth a little bit. Or at least it's perceived that way. Because like when he went to the land of the Philistines, we don't see him consulting God. You know, God, I know you said you can take care of me, but I really think that I should go over there. Right? So he kind of does his own thing there. But then after Ziklag, he's like, okay, something's wrong. I've messed up. And where does he do? What does he do? He goes back, he regroups, he resets, redoes his refocus on God. And then what happens in verse 8? He directly asks God. David inquired at the Lord, saying, shall I pursue? Right? And the Lord answers. Right? And then in verse 18, drop down to verse 18, and David recovered all that the Amalekites had carried away and rescued his 2 wives. So now if he had taken the time to actually fight with Israel, like what the original plan was, Ziklag was still burned. Everything was still taken and is gone. If he had fought with Israel, he never would have found that Egyptian that was left in the field, because he would have been dead. He never would have caught back up to the Amalekites, and he never would have recovered all. So the situation that he was put in, that ended up kicking him back to Ziklag, it's funny, again, how God uses circumstances. And like Peter, how he liked to jump ahead for us, right? Look at verse 17. Verse 17, and David smote them from the twilight even unto the evening of the next day. And there escaped not a man of them, save 400 young men which rode upon camels and fled. Okay, so now, only a few escaped. What is actually happening in this whole scenario here, with David being in the land of the Philistines, going to fight, getting bounced back to Ziklag, and then chasing after this troop? Does he know when he pursues this troop who the troop is? No. He has no idea. Well, at least as far as we can tell, he has no idea, because they could have written in the burnt wall of the city that, the Amalekites were here, I don't know, tagging the city. But it doesn't say that. So he doesn't know that until he talks to the Egyptians, the Egyptian slave that was going to die. And even then, they had to wait for him to get a little bit better so he would even talk, right? So it's funny how God uses these circumstances to accomplish whose will? His will. Because what was his will back in 1 Samuel 15? That the Amalekites would be wiped out. Oh, and what happened right here? The judgment on Amalek that was originally supposed to happen by the hand of Saul finally got performed. All right? So, the bizarre circumstances that we have here, God uses to accomplish his will, right? And we see these types of things like, why, and we read through these stories and we go, why would you go to Gath? That is so dumb. Why would you go to the land of the Philistines? That makes no sense. Why did they let you in? That makes no sense, right? In our logic. But who's actually working? God's plan. God's doing the work, right? Because in the end, this is going to help establish David as king. This is also going to take care of the Amalekite issue he had in 1 Samuel 15. Darlene.
So when we mess up, he can change his plan a little, but he still knows where he wants to go with it.
Right, very good. Think about the stories we've seen so far. Abraham. Did everything Abraham did make sense? No. Right? Moses. No. Joseph. The circumstances that are there. Right? Elijah. Jonah. You can go on and on. The situations that these people get themselves in because of their own, sometimes logic, right? Their own fear, their own heart, their own whatever. God uses these circumstances to accomplish his own will, right? Because, especially I love the story of Jonah, right? If Jonah hadn't been in the whale for 3 days and probably come out bleached because of it, and when he walks into this city of Nineveh and goes, yeah, God's going to destroy your city, do you think anybody would have listened? Right? But now his appearance has been changed because of that. Because his message was not wholehearted, fire and brimstone all there. He'd probably whisper in a corner, God's going to destroy your city and, you should go. And everyone's like, what? What did he say? Tell the king, right? And the whole city changes, right? Okay. God uses those circumstances, not our logic. Not our logic. We like to think we're smart. Right? We like to think we're smart, but we're not. 1 Samuel 31, verses 1 through 5. Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell down slain in Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines followed hard upon Saul and upon his sons. And the Philistines slew Jonathan and Abinadab and Melchishua, Saul's sons. And the battle went sore against Saul, and the archers hit him, and he was sore wounded of the archers. Then said Saul unto his armor-bearer, draw thy sword, and thrust me through therewith, lest these uncircumcised come and thrust me through, and abuse me. But his armor-bearer would not, for he was sore afraid. Therefore Saul took a sword and fell upon it. And when his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he fell likewise upon his sword and died with him. So Saul died, and his 3 sons, and his armor-bearer, and all his men that same day together. All right, so in verse 3, you find Saul wounded by the archers, right? He wanted his armor-bearer to finish him off, so that way the Philistines didn't get credit for it and abuse him. That was his fear there. But his armor-bearer wouldn't. Right? So he ended up falling on his own sword, and his armor-bearer in verse 5 falls on his own sword as well. So it's interesting how it mentions in verse 6 that his 3 sons, Saul died, okay, so the king is gone, and his 3 sons. So that's going to be his 3 oldest sons. So Jonathan is gone, the one he had been trying to preserve as king. But not even just Jonathan is gone. Now you've got the 2 after that gone as well. Right? So that whole line gets stomped on right there. Now, what we have is an interesting twist here in 2 Samuel chapter 1, where a man comes from the camp of Israel to tell David. Right? If we drop down to verse 4, chapter 1, verse 4, and David said unto him, How went the matter, I pray thee, tell me. And he answered, that the people are fled from the battle, and many of the people also are fallen and dead. And Saul and Jonathan his son are dead also. And David said unto the young man that told him, How knowest thou that Saul and Jonathan his son are dead? And the young man that told him said, As I happened by chance upon Mount Gilboa, behold, Saul leaned upon his spear, and lo, the chariots and horsemen followed hard after him. And when he looked behind him, he saw me and called unto me, and I answered, Here am I. And he said unto me, Who art thou? And I answered him, I am an Amalekite. And he said unto me again, Stand, I pray thee, upon me, and slay me, for anguish is come upon me, because my life is yet whole in me. So I stood upon him and slew him, because I was sure that he could not live after that he was fallen. And I took the crown that was upon his head, and the bracelet that was on his arm, and have brought them hither to my Lord. All right, so what just happened there? We've got this man coming from the camp of Israel to tell David that Saul is dead. He lied, right? He told David that Saul and Jonathan were dead. And what did David ask him? How do you know? How do you know? And what does he tell him? Yeah, I killed him, right? He asked me to. So he's putting himself in the story similar to what the armor bearer's position was. Saul asked the armor bearer, look, finish me off. This isn't going to work for me, right? So he's trying to put himself. Is he the armor bearer? No. No, he's not. Okay? So some will tell you that this is an error in the Bible, right? Look how Saul died. You can't even agree, and you're not even a chapter apart, right? That's not what's going on here. Chapter 31 is how Saul died, right? That is the account of how Saul died. If you look at the verses in 2 Samuel chapter 1, this is somebody who is trying to get into David's good graces because he knew that David was being chased by Saul. Now, what's interesting there is that he comes and tells David that Saul and Jonathan are dead. David asks him, how do you know? And what does the Amalekite answer him? He killed Saul. And Jonathan is where? All right? Okay? So his story is incomplete. He's telling David what he thinks David wants to know. Look, the king is dead because I killed the king. Yeah, look at me. You should praise me for that. Right? And, oh yeah, Jonathan's dead too. I don't know how that happened. I don't know. Right? Okay? So that's kind of what's going on here. He only reports on Saul. What's interesting that is in verse 8, we have a small detail that gets mentioned twice. Thank you, Peter. Verse 8, and he said unto me, who art thou? So Saul's asking this this guy, who art thou? And I answered him, I am an Amalekite. Right? That detail also gets mentioned again in verse 13. And David said unto the young man that told him, Whence art thou? And he answered, I am the son of a stranger, an Amalekite. All right? Now, what do we know from 1 Samuel 15? What did God want done to the Amalekites? Right? What did David just come back from doing? Right? And now, one more shows up with this lie about how he killed Saul and with no report on Jonathan. So what does he end up doing in verses 15 and 16? And David called, 14, let's start in 14. And David said unto him, How wast thou not afraid to stretch forth thine hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? And David called one of the young men and said, Go near and fall upon him, and he smote him that he died. And David said unto him, Thy blood be upon thy head, for thy mouth hath testified against thee, saying, I have slain the Lord's anointed. Right? So now this last Amalekite that just shows up, claiming to have killed King Saul, is now put out of his misery by David. Right? Okay. If we look at verses 11 through 12, we see David's reaction to Saul and Jonathan's death. In verses 11 and 12, Then David took hold on his clothes and rent them, and likewise all the men that were with him. And they mourned and wept and fasted till evening, for Saul and for Jonathan his son, and for the people of the Lord, and for the house of Israel, because they were fallen by the sword. What do you not see David doing? Rejoicing. Now, wait a minute. Saul was the dude who has been trying to kill him since early on. He's been chasing him all around Israel. He's the whole reason he had to flee and go to the Philistines in the first place. He's the reason why his parents are up with the king of Moab. But what happens when Saul is dead? He rents his clothes, he mourns, and in verses 17 through 27, there's a whole lamentation going on, right? So notice that despite all that Saul had put him through, David didn't hate Saul. David did not hate Saul. Peter.
David had the right respect for God in the sense of God's authority.
Mm-hmm.
Because as troubled as Saul was, he had still been anointed by God.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore he forbid some of his other men from killing him the opportunities that they had. Because like you said, who can be guiltless if you kill God's anointed?
Right.
And I think it's in Psalms off the top of my head, but touch not my anointed, do my prophets no harm.
Yep, exactly.
God takes it serious. If the man of God is screwing up, you better be careful how you handle that.
Yeah, that's right. That's very good. But now flip it around. Flip it around between our relationship between us and God. Right? Did Saul mess up? Yeah. Did David hate him? David is a man after God's own heart. Right? When we mess up, does God hate us? No. Right? Right? Remember, he pities us like children. Does he have mercy? Does he have grace? Yes. Is he disappointed? Oh, yeah. Does he chasten us? Oh, yeah. Does he hate you? No. Right? The world will like to tell you that we treat him like one of those volcano gods, where things start rumbling, now we have to appease him because he's angry and he hates us. That's not our God, is it? That is not our God. And with that, we will have to conclude our epic adventure through God's Word today.